She answering. And who am I? That's not a secret I'll never tell. You know you love me. XOXO. Gossip Girl.
What's up? Today we got Gossip Girl, Season 2, Episode 7, Chuck in Real Life. This episode starts off at the Vanderwoodsons' penthouse. Serena comes to breakfast table to find Lily, Chuck, and Eric sitting silently. Bart comes down and explains that his meetings had wrapped up sooner than expected and he's back for the long haul. Lily mentions their housewarming party planned for the next evening and tells Eric that they're allowed to bring friends when he's asked. He asks Serena if she saw the soup Bart bought for her. She says yes, but she figured it was for the housekeeper. Bart announced that he and Lily have some new ground rules that they thought of together, including weekly family dinners, no going out on school nights, and a weekend curfew at 1 a.m. Serena demands to know whose idea this was, and Lily assures her that she and Bart made the decision together. At the Humphrey loft, Dan sees Vanessa gathering her flyer to save a bar in Brooklyn by petitioning a landmark stat. Jane jumps in and says that her parents and Eleanor already signed, i.e., Allison signed the paper off screen. Vanessa suggests she accompany Dan to the school to see if anyone would be interested in signing. Then she noticed Dan carrying a sports bag and asks whose bag it is. He explained that Nate asked him to fill in on the soccer team because of most of the team got mono. Meanwhile, Serena and Eric walk to school as she vents about the new rule. Eric assures her that she should I think this is the season where Eric got full brown hair. I think I saw it. Yeah. This is the season where Eric brown hair look finally debuts. Eric tries to assure her that Bart isn't trying to control Serena, trying to control everything, and Serena agrees to give Lily's new marriage and rules a chance. At Constance St. Jude, Nate tells Dan that Coach was impressed with his tryout, and as they walk together, they run into Chuck, who tries to get Nate to be his friend again. However, Nate blows him off and they walk away with Dan. Immediately after, Blair approaches Chuck and mocks him for losing his best friend to Dan Humphrey. Chuck reminds her of all the time they slept together and asks when it will happen again. She assures her that they will never be together. Yeah, right. And goes to lecture a girl about wearing tights as pants. As she does so, Vanessa asks for a moment of her time. Blair grants her request, and Vanessa explains her campaign to save a bar before telling her that she has to obtain $1,000. Or else she'll tell her, literally, okay, Vanessa, this is not how you go about things. Okay. Vanessa, asking Blair for the signature is one thing, but threatening her, you're messing with the wrong person, Vanessa. You really think that threatening Blair Waldorf is going to get her to agree? No. Threatening to expose Catherine and Marcus's photo, you think that's going to get her to agree? Or she'll allow everyone about Catherine and Marcus. She leaves Blair with a petition and leaves. That night, Chuck sees Serena in bed writing a book. He tells her that he's going out and the new rules don't apply to him since he knows Bart only came home early to court some executive who won't do business with people with no family value. Chuck reminds her that unlike her, his business isn't spread all over page 6. And leaves. Serena thinks this over and gets ready to go out in a skimpy dress. She runs into Bart on her way to the elevator and announces that she's going to find some paparazzi. At the door, Chuck arrives to see Blair, who presents him with a proposition. She tells him that Vanessa is bothering her, and since Dan stole Chuck's best friend Nate, Chuck might as well steal Vanessa. She suggests that he seduce and destroy Vanessa, then hands him flowers for the bar canteen, and he agrees to her plan, and they toast to it. Back the next day, Blair and Serena have brunch together while they wait for Eric to bring his new boyfriend Jonathan so they can meet him before the party. They talk, and Blair mentions Chuck, and Serena notices that her smiling a little when she says his name. At the loft, Dan explains his soccer practice to Jane. She notes that maybe now that he'll have a guy, maybe now that he has guy friends, now maybe he'll have guy friends more than have guy friends to hang out with. Confused, Dan asks what she means, and she explains that Dan likes hanging out with girls more than guys. Rufus doesn't disagree, and to prove them wrong, Dan calls Nate to see if he wants to hang out. Nate agrees, and they make plans to meet that afternoon to play soccer. Meanwhile, Vanessa's friend and owner of the bar, Horace, is impressed at the turnout. Chuck arrives and brings Vanessa one of her flyers. She refuses to hear out his plan and accuses him of wanting to turn the bar into a yuppie fashion bar. He says that he would restore the place to its former glory, but she says she knows him, and he asks if she really does, or she thinks she does before he gets hit with a slushie. He gets back into his limo and leaves. At the Vanderwoods, Serena arrives home and confronted by Lily, but for her antics the night before. Lily says that Serena could benefit from a little structure. Serena retorts that she could have just pushed several husbands ago, and Lily says that's unkind to say, and Serena says she isn't coming to a family party that night. Meanwhile, Dan arrives at Nate's house and finds a bunch of notices and states establishing the home as seized and under federal investigation. However, he finds a way into the house and discover it's completely empty except for a sleeping bag and several garment bags of dry cleaning. At the Waldorf, Chuck arrives to see Blair and tells her that the deal is off. She begs him to reconsider, but he says he isn't worth it if the payout isn't worth it. She offers to make it worth his while, makes it worth it, and alludes to letting him sleep with her if she succeeds. Chuck mulls it over and decides to try again. At succeeding, because, Chuck Bass just wants Blair. At the Vanderwoods, Vanessa comes to see Chuck, and she says she's brought his lawyer. She says his lawyer was brought by his official proposal, which did include keeping the bar as it and petitioning for a landmark status. He asks why she came to the apartment and says Horace wants to officially meet him to feel comfortable with signing over his support. He agrees to get dressed. Meanwhile, Serena goes to the Waldorf's and vents her complaints to Blair as she gets dressed for the party. They reminisce about Lily's many boyfriends and husbands and the toll it took on Serena and Eric. Serena complains how gorgeous Blair looks and how compliments on how gorgeous Blair looks and asks where she got her dress. She admits that Chuck gave it to her when they're supposed to go to Europe. Back at the party, Nate and Dan have wrapped their soccer game. Nate asks if Dan's going to the housewarming party. Dan says no, and Nate asks if he's going either. He asks if he would invite Dan over but the house is a mess since the housekeeper has a week off. Dan asks where Anne is, and Nate says she's still in the Hamptons and asks if he's staying with Chuck. He accuses himself to get a drink. At the bar, Chuck is impressed and meets Horace, who compliments him and welcomes him warmly. At the loft, Jane gets a call from Dan, who explains to her what he saw. She explains that Nate's probably embarrassed to admit his situation. She decides to invite Nate to dinner to have Rufus and chili, and they can convince him to stay. Dan agrees and asks her not to say anything to Rufus. They hang up, and he extends his invitation to Nate, who accepts. At the Vanderwoods, Serena arrives home to find Jonathan in the living room. She asks if he's there for Eric, and he explains that Eric isn't home. He was just dropping off some books. Confused, she asks if he means he's not coming to the party. Jonathan explains that Bart told Eric that the party was family only. Back at the bar, Vanessa asks Chuck if she's serious about saving the place. He says he is. He says yes, and she apologizes for misjudging him. As he was about to say something else, he gets a text from Blair, who's wondering how it's going. He ignores it and invites Vanessa to the housewarming party. At the party, Louie notices Serena and Bart are going and goes to handle it. He comments on how the suit looks on and says they're glad she came to the party after all. She says she's waiting on some friends and asks okay for friends to come. He says yes and asks if Lily knows he told Eric not to bring Jonathan. Bart explains that he didn't tell Eric that and that they had a talk, which led Eric to coming to a decision on his own. Meanwhile, Blair approaches Chuck for progress report on Operation Destroy Vanessa, and Chuck says, which is a plan I just came up with, that's not in the script, but still, Chuck, he tells her that he's going to really buy it, and she asks him if he's still going to admit Vanessa. He distractedly says yes and excuses himself to greet Vanessa, who just arrived. Blair notices the two together, and Blair asks for a moment to speak with Chuck alone. After all, Dan, Jenny, and Nate and Rufus finish dinner. Rufus asks how Nate's home, and Nate admits that he's staying alone while his mom's away. He's fine with it because it's his childhood home. Back at the party, Bart confronts Chuck about buying a bar behind his back. Chuck says it wasn't supposed to be a secret, and it's a great business deal for all involved. Chuck accuses him of betraying his trust and wasting his time. Because again, your dad is awful, Chuck. Back at the law, Nate helps clean up and then tells Dan to probably go home. Before they leave, Dan admits they saw the living situation wants to help. Angry, Nate tells Dan that just because they hung out a couple times doesn't mean he needs to be involved in the situation, and he orders him to stay out of it and leave. Back at the party, Vanessa finds Chuck sitting alone in Serena's room and says she overheard his conversation with Bart. She says she's sorry and he deserves a better dad. I agree. He replies that she still doesn't really know him, and Bart made a good point about him. She goes to leave, but Chuck takes her hand and asks her to stay. Blair walks in on this and is hurt by what she sees. In the main room, Eric tells Serena that Bart told him he could bring Jonathan, but he should be sure if he wants to come out as gay in front of all the press will be at the party. Serena says he's only worried about a deal, but Eric admits that he doesn't really think so. While they talk, a couple of reports come up from Lily notices and asks to borrow Serena to say something before she says something wrong. Lily offers to talk about family trips that she took, but Serena takes the opportunity to mention Lily put her boyfriend before her own kids, and even the ones that do drugs. She then tells Lily that she was wrong to accuse Bart of being controlling and out of place, when that's really been Lily doing all, it's been what Lily's doing all along. Meanwhile, Blair tells Chuck that the deal is off because she's bored with the game. She explains that Vanessa isn't worth either of their time since she's so beneath both of them. Chuck expects that she's worried he'll succeed. She assures them it's not that. He asks what is it, and she hesitates for telling him to forget it. Blair vents about what Serena did to Eric. What Serena did to Eric, and asks him if Serena said it's true. Eric says that while her timing was bad, she was absolutely right. Eric finished by saying that they need to become a family by bonding, not just by telling everyone they are. After the law, Dan and Ruth sit together. Dan notices Dan is still upset about what happened, and Dan says he tried to help Nate, and it's not his fault he bailed. Rufus says that being a friend includes giving someone what they need, even though they don't ask for it. That includes offering to help when it's turned down. Dan refuses to do that, and Rufus says that the situation is tense and that Nate really has no one looking out for him. Dan has the opportunity to do so as a friend. Back at the party, Vanessa's having trouble locating her bag at the coat check. Blair then appears and announces that she took her bag and her cell phone and deleted all the photos of Catherine and Marcus. She also explains to Vanessa that Vanessa didn't find the hidden Chuck, and all the feelings that she thinks she might have were all part of a bet they had to humiliate her. Vanessa says, "I don't believe you, Blair." And Blair says Blair's probably just worried because Chuck is a decent person when he's not around Blair. Chuck comes over and Blair asks Blair what's going on. She answers that she was just explaining their game to Vanessa to make sure she understands that Vanessa was just a chess piece that he needed to knock over in order for Chuck to get Blair. She asks if he disagrees, and he says nothing. Vanessa says that she should have known and leaves. Chuck then asks what was the point of all this was, and Blair says she was she was communicating like she wanted, and he won the game, and his prize will be her in her bedroom in 1 hour. Serena runs in Dan on outside Nate's house. She asks him to sit with her. At the bar, Chuck goes to see Horace, who's already heard from Vanessa the deal is over, and he tells him to leave. Chuck says he's still going to try to stay at the bar, and Horace replies that he was dead wrong about Chuck and offended. Chuck leaves. Back at Nate's, Dan tells Serena that he came to see Nate's friend, and she says that she came because she needed to get out of her house. He asks her to pretend like he's Nate so she can talk openly. She explains about the party and what she did to Lily in front of everyone. Dan says that maybe Lily tries to act like she's perfect, but she can't acknowledge how far from perfect she really is. She apologizes for everything that happened with them, and he does too. Immediately after, Bart pulls up and asks to take Serena home. She tells Dan that he should go home and test. She tells Dan she should go home and test his theory, and says that she's glad he's Nate's friend because he really needs a friend like Dan. Back at the Vanderwoods, Serena and Bart find the apartment empty except for Lily and Eric. She apologizes to Serena for not being a good mother for the first 17 years of her life, and they all reminisce on the funny stories from the years past. And Serena apologizes for the magazine snafu, and they all apologize to Bart for how she acted. He accepts her apology, and they all eat cake together as they make up. At the loft, Dan brings Nate home, and Rufus and Jay welcome him by telling him to make himself at home. At the Waldorf, Chuck enters Blair's room and finds it filled with candles on her bed in lingerie. She asks him what took so long, and they begin to make up. Before they do anything, he asks her to say She asks him to say three words, 8 letters. She asks him to say. She refuses, and she says she will never say those words to him. And he responds by getting up and saying she will never have him then. Shocked, she asks if it's because of Vanessa, and if it is, he needs to remember it was just a game. He answers that he wants to raise the stakes, and now it's Blair's turn to chase him, as he's been chasing her for too long. He leaves Blair in his room alone, as he goes home, ending the episode. Ow. So that was Chuck in real life. So yeah, I feel like Chuck kind of felt bad for Vanessa in a way, and that Blair ruined everything. Nate is kind of now living with Dan. 2, Lily apologized to Serena for her being a bad mom. And 4, Chuck literally gave Blair the 3 words, 8 letters. 3 words, 8 letter speech. That was 4 words, but this is 3. But, yeah. Next episode, we got Pret a Poor J. I guess it's a Jenny episode, but, yeah. We got Pret a Poor J, which is a Jenny episode. But still, that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time for Pret a Poor J. You know you love me. XOXO, Gossip Girl.